afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Black Health Trust. We are so happy that you chose to spend some time with us, and we are going to have I'm sure, very interesting conversation about a subject that I alluded to a couple of weeks ago after hearing about the deaths of some prominent Black men from prostate cancer. Today, we're going to revisit the world of prostate health. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Barbara, Neighbor Stevens, Dr. Walks, and Dr. Hines, and certainly our special guest, Dr. Brian Stone. And this topic is very personal to me. Some years ago, when I had a diagnosis of prostate cancer and had a surgery to remove it, and I met with Dr. Stone, and he said, there's a drug that starts with an S, and I want you to take it like it's candy. Some people know it as a blue pill, but it worked. And I've been his fan ever since. And due to the fact that we have still a high incidence in our community, including our Secretary of Defense and a number of our colleagues still getting prostate cancer, we need this information to help us survive. Dr. Stone, I'm going to ask Dr. Neighbor Stevens if she would introduce you with some of the details of your training, and then the floor is yours, sir. I respect you very much, and thank you for the advice you gave my life.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, we are very happy to welcome back to Black Health Trust someone who has impeccable credentials in the field of urology. He is a native of Alabama. He has finished his training at great institutions such as UAB School of Medicine.
What is UAB?
University of Alabama in Birmingham.
Oh, yes. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Don't want to slight that. He is boarded in urology and is a well-recognized authority in urological science as well as a researcher. And we don't have enough research going on in our community, so we need to highlight and elevate our colleagues who are aggressively attempting to fill the void of data that we suffer from. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Stone.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you guys having me back. Since I spoke about prostate cancer the last time, I decided to change the presentation a bit. Am I sharing screen right now?
Not yet.
You want me to try?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, we can see it.
All right. So I'm currently the president of Jasper Urology Associates, which is a private practice in Jasper, Alabama. We're at Walker Baptist Medical Center, which is a regional medical center servicing about 900,000 people. We are the only center for about 5 counties. I'm also very proud to be an executive board member of Conduct, which is a Black consortium on disparities of urologic conditions. And we have just launched the SCOPE African American Prostate Cancer Registry Trial, which we hope will be the largest repository of information on African American men with prostate cancer. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Clinical Diversity Solutions because The traditional model of recruiting patients to participate in clinical trials just has not worked. That means going to physicians and getting them to recruit patients to participate. One of the big problems is that there aren't enough Black physicians. The numbers are actually going down. And because patients can go anywhere, not all Black patients go to Black physicians. So we need a better recruitment model. So that's what I'm working on right now. So what do all these Black men have in common? Dexter King, I'm sure you've all heard about him having recently died from prostate cancer. Uh, he was someone I knew, and I have several friends that knew him well. He became very private, probably presented late in his diagnosis, even though he was a young man. General Lloyd Austin similarly did not handle his diagnosis well. General Colin Powell, Sidney Poitier. I worked with Harry Belafonte, who was very open about his diagnosis when I was in New York and promoted early detection. Al Roker has also been vocal, Shannon Sharp, uh, Ken Griffey Sr. I worked with Michael Haynes, who helped pass a bill in the 90s supporting PSA screening. So prostate cancer does not discriminate. It doesn't care who you are, if you're a celebrity or whatever. It will take out anyone. It is called the silent killer because it is asymptomatic in the earliest stages. So you don't feel anything. So the typical thing you hear from a Black guy is, look, I feel healthy. I feel good. That's the time when it's growing. By the time you're symptomatic, you're probably in an advanced stage. So prostate cancer is the largest cancer disparity in the United States. Even after all these years of promoting PSA and all the other screening activities, it continues to be the largest disparity amongst Black men and everybody with cancer. Black men have a 2 times greater risk of dying from prostate cancer and almost a 2 times greater chance of being diagnosed. And this has been pretty consistent since records have been kept. I can say that the mortality rate, which was almost 3 times greater in the 90s, has come down some with the creation of the screening test PSA. But one of the major problems is that as new treatments are developed, these new developments are based on data collected from participants in clinical trials, and Black men represent less than 8% of the participants in prostate cancer clinical trials. Now, access to early detection is not one of the main drivers of racial disparities. There are a lot of complex factors that are impacting this huge disparity between Black men and white men. Genetics and cell biology, with the completion of the Human Genome Project, we have really identified significant genetic factors that seem to impact the veracity of prostate cancer in Black men. We've all heard the term social determinants of health. It is a major factor. Where you live, how much money you have, do you have insurance? Do you have transportation? Do you have childcare? What's your educational level? Institutional racism plays a major role. There are several studies in the 90s and early 2000s showing that patients presenting with the same diagnosis, like say renal failure, Black people were more likely to be given dialysis and a white person referred for a transplant. Black men with prostate cancer are more likely to be referred for radiation therapy versus a more curative surgical procedure. There's a lot of new science that's emerging about other factors that drive disparities in prostate cancer. So the VA, which is a good system of equal access to care, has done several studies that have pretty much shown that access to care does not guarantee equal outcomes. Um, so I made racial red because race is a social construct. And what genetic research has shown is that race has nothing to do with anything, and it actually has a negative impact on data when patients are allowed to self-report by race. We should be looking at genetic differences in prostate cancer cell biology. What we know, Black men tend to have a higher baseline level of free testosterone. Black men with prostate cancer exhibit increased androgen receptor signaling. They have increased genomic instability, increased metabolic dysregulation, increased inflammatory and cytokine signaling. These all seem to make the prostate cancer more aggressive and at a higher Gleason score, which is how the cancers are graded pathologically. This was a huge study, and it showed that a multitude of data supports the hypothesis that systemic discrimination, racism, and socioeconomic difference are major drivers of prostate cancer disparities. And I dare say all of the diseases that disproportionately impact Black people are impacted by the same things. The true incidence of prostate cancer in the United States is that 1.76, a Black man is 1.76 times more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. Black men are 2.14 times more likely to die from prostate cancer. We are much more likely to present at a younger age and present with advanced disease when the diagnosis is made. 9.6% of Black men are uninsured compared to 16.7% of Hispanic men and 5.2% of white men. And while both Black and Hispanic males face the same barriers to healthcare, Black men have the highest incidence of mortality from prostate cancer. This means that there's more going on than just access to healthcare. So this kind of supports the notion that there are biological factors driving the different outcomes. And we don't have enough data about social determinants of health, but I am certain that there are environmental factors that are impacting our genes. One study identified a gene that seemed to travel with us during the Atlantic Passage and slavery. And Black men we were deposited in the Caribbean, we were deposited in Brazil, and we had the same gene that came to the United States. But for whatever reason, we in the United States have the worst form of prostate cancer. So some of us have discussed it, and we think maybe the severity of slavery in the United States was a epigenetic factor that had for some reason turned on genes that made our prostate cancer worse. We know redlining has always put us in the worst places, more toxic exposure. So there's a lot of data that needs to be collected to help us kind of tease out why we have the worst prostate cancer in the world. There was a study that showed that as socioeconomic status increases for white men, prostate cancer mortality rates decrease, but in Black men, it has no impact. I mentioned this earlier, but this was a study that looked at a equal access health system. One of the problems was the cohorts were small, but they looked at 300,000 Black men in one study, and they compared them to white men. And when there was equal access, and I highlighted when the patients are given the same treatment, the prostate cancer survival became equal. So that's where systemic racism is an issue. We're not always given the same treatment. I mentioned this when I gave my last talk, but I think all of you are aware of the United States Preventative Services Task Force recommendation against PSA screening in 2012. And for about 6 years, PSA was given a D grade. Well, the behavioral risk factor surveillance system reported significant decreases in PSA screening during that time. And as a result, the incidence ratio of localized prostate significantly increased in Black men compared to white men during this period. And we saw considerable increases in the mortality rate in Black men and presentation with more advanced prostate cancer. And we are still recovering from the impact of that recommendation. And this is for both Black and white patients. Since that time, I've been seeing patients getting to me with much higher PSAs. The primary care physicians are sitting and waiting and treating patients with antibiotics instead of sending them immediately to a urologist to be evaluated. The addition of the MRI has reduced the need for prostate biopsy. So there's no reason to hold out on referring a patient for a PSA that is either elevated above what is considered normal or has an abnormal PSA velocity. If a PSA increases greater than 0.75 nanograms per milliliter in a 12-month period, that's abnormal. So you should send that to a specialist and let him figure out whether this is something significant or not. Military service can result in aggressive prostate cancer. I take care of a lot of veterans who unfortunately were exposed to Agent Orange, burn pits. Since the Gulf War, a lot of the munitions used depleted uranium. So they're being exposed to radioactive materials and other chemicals, and these have been associated with much more aggressive prostate cancers. Black servicemen, even though the rate of prostate cancer increased in Black and white men, the Black servicemen had higher Gleason scores and more aggressive prostate cancer than their white counterparts. So this suggests, again, a biological factor. So there appears to be a dance between non-biological factors like social determinants of health and biological factors in the promotion of health disparities. Prostate cancer-related loci in Black men appear to play a greater role in impacting the severity of prostate cancer. We see increased DNA abnormalities and hypermethylation. One of the problems is because of the lack of participation in genetic studies, tissue samples are very limited. And I'll speak about it later, how this is affecting our survival. We don't really have a lot of studies to answer the questions that I would like to see answered. One of the major barriers that we're seeing now as we move toward precision medicine is the lack of tissue. You need to give tissue in order to get genetic material. There was one recent study I found by Rensock. It looked at 72 global phase 2 and 4 clinical trials with almost 1 million participants. 96% were white and 3% or less were African or Caribbean Blacks. That's terrible. And there was a recent study I found in the United States showing that all the clinical trials on metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer grossly underrepresented Black men at less than 0.5%. That's horrendous. So the majority of the therapeutics that are being created basically for white people. Um, we had our conduct conference last fall, and we had Peter Pinto, who is from the National Cancer Institute, Urological Solid Tumors Division, and he presented some data to us on a new uh, genetic modifier. Some of these are called PARP2 inhibitors. They gave it to a series of white patients, and it downregulated the prostate cancer, creating a great response. But in the few black patients they had, it made the prostate cancer worse. He also showed us the segment of the gene where they've been mapping out mutations related to prostate cancer. They've identified 80 plus for white men, and they've only identified one for black men. And there's a whole black area on that genome where they haven't got the information, but yet they're promoting drugs without knowing the true impact on black patients. That's a problem. So I put this up just to highlight how heterogeneous black people are. That's my ancestry DNA, and I don't know how many of you have done it, but if you're a black, you're going to find that you are a true mutt. I have over, oh my God, it's about 13 to 14 different genetic links. And then I have my wife's ancestry DNA. She's French. Very limited heterogeneity, which makes it much easier to map out as we move toward genetic like focused treatment. It would be much easier to treat her than a black person. This has an impact on us when we try to be cross-matched for a kidney transplant. We are very heterogeneous, so much more information needs to be gathered about us genetically before all of these treatments are released to the general public. But money drives the system. So there are limitations of genetic testing in the current environment where most of the data is being collected on white patients. So one of the big problems is allowing patients to self-report race. Matter of fact, race should not even be included. It should be genetically based categorization of patients. Just because you're black, you may look brown in appearance. That doesn't say anything about your genetic code. So Rick Kittles, he is a black geneticist. He worked on the Human Genome Project. He is now faculty at Morehouse School of Medicine, has illustrated some of the issues with some of these off-the-shelf genetic testing kits. So he looked at a couple that supposedly had African-American prostate cancer cell lines, which if they really were that, they should have been over 90% African. But it's the opposite. They were 91% European genetic ancestry. So these tests aren't accurate. They don't have enough of our information to create accurate tests, which is why it is necessary for us to participate in clinical research. So there are clearly genetic and molecular reasons for the disparities in prostate cancer. Histologic and genetic data, like I just showed you, shows that prostate cancer in us is highly heterogeneous. And our genetic information contributes to the phenotypic and functional variability that we see in prostate cancer, like the increased Gleason score, the more aggressive presentation at lower PSA levels. The biologic factors play a critical role in the early onset of prostate cancer and how we respond to treatment. I have plenty of black patients that I removed the prostate. They have negative surgical margins, meaning that the cancer was contained. Lymph nodes are negative. And yet, within 4 or 5 years, they may come back with a rising PSA and compare them to a similar white patient that had the same PSA, the same Gleason score, it's less likely to happen. So there's something going on biologically that makes the cancer in us different, and we need to figure that out. There's something going on with androgen receptor signaling in Black men. Um, it's not because we don't have a lot of data. I'm not a geneticist, but these are the abnormalities that I've identified from a review of all the literature. Black men have increased androgen receptor proteins. We have increased androgen ligands compared to white men. We have shorter CAG or cytosine, adenine, guanine repeats. We have androgen receptor splice variants. Vitamin D deficiency is very prevalent in Black men, has some impact on the biology of prostate cancer. Um, the new treatments now, I have one. I guess you can't really see this, but I had a rep come to me just yesterday with a product called Xtandi. It's created by Pfizer, and it is an androgen receptor inhibitor. And they're promoting combining it with a new drug called Talzena, which is a PARP inhibitor. They haven't even adequately done the genetic coding to understand whether or not this drug is going to help us or hurt us. And yet it's already on the market and they're trying to promote it. And I had a pretty engaged conversation with her about how irresponsible it is to be promoting this drug and you don't have data in the high-risk population. She left my office speechless yesterday. So these additional markers, FOXA1, SPOP, CHD1, in a couple of some of the Black patients, there are increased alterations, but they don't have enough data to really be able to figure out what it means. What are the implications? We see significant germline mutations in DNA repair genes in Black men, and it's associated with a higher risk of prostate cancer, higher risk of more aggressive prostate cancer. I'm sure you all have heard of the BRCA genes, BRCA1 and 2. They're associated with breast cancer, but they're also associated with an increased risk of prostate cancer. The BRCA mutations are currently the best predictor of a response to chemotherapy like platinum-based agents and PARP inhibitors. But again, we don't have a lot of information. For those of you who don't know what a PARP inhibitor is, PARP helps a cell repair its cell wall and helps it stay alive. And so the idea is that if you block PARP in cancer cells, you'll stop them from being able to repair the cell wall and promote cell death. But turning off something in one group may turn on something in another. So unless you have the data to make sure that's not happening, it's not necessarily a safe thing to do. We see racial disparities and metabolic dysregulation. This has a lot to do with high-fat diets and obesity, which appears to increase prostate cancer incidence and the aggressiveness of prostate cancer. It boils down to one thing. We found that when we do androgen blockade, which prostate cancer is a hormone-sensitive cancer, it grows in response to testosterone, and part of the treatment strategies is to block testosterone. Once you shut it off, we found that some of the cancer cells have figured out a way to create their own testosterone. And it comes from this lipogenesis pathway. So increased lipogenesis allows for cells to create better, stronger cell walls, create their own androgen, and create their own source of energy production. But we still need a lot of research to figure out what this means in Black patients versus white patients. So My take on it is we're seeing a rapid movement toward precision medicine. In Birmingham, where I am now, there's a partnership between the University of Alabama in Birmingham and Southern Research. They're about to build a huge precision medicine hospital, and the focus will be on using your genetic information to create personalized treatments. That's going to leave Black people out. It's hard enough to get us to participate in drug clinical trials. Now you're expecting them to trust institutions they don't trust, give up tissue. So if we're not in the room with this, we're going to get left out again and left behind. Um, so I think we need to focus on re-educating our primary care physician gatekeepers about the importance of screening and early detection and the use of PSA. Uh, if they're afraid of unnecessary biopsies, that is much less of an issue with the advent of the new MRI technology. Uh, my group, which has created the SCOPE African American Prostate Cancer Registry Trial, is going to be very active in trying to increase the numbers of Black men who are willing to participate in prostate cancer clinical trials. My other company is working on some novel recruitment technology using handheld technology like cell phones and working with faith-based institutions, which have well over 40 million members, to try to educate, recruit, and get more of us involved in clinical trials. And it's not just prostate cancer. This is across the board. All the therapeutics that we use are being created based on white people with limited data on Black people. The phase two drug creation goes through 4 phases. Phase two, 1 and 2 are critical in deciding on the dose and the side effects profile. And if no Black people or Hispanics or Asians are in that group, when it reaches phase three, the dose is set. So a lot of the problems are discovered in phase four post-marketing trials. But the dose is set, 50 milligrams, maybe it should have been 100 milligrams in somebody Black or 25 milligrams in somebody Asian. But once this hit the market, they're not going to go back and spend the money and make the changes. So our participation in clinical research is critical. I'm going to end my talk there, and any questions, I'm open.
Dr. Stone, I thank you so much for this outstanding talk. I'm both happy you gave the talk, and now you got me really scared.
We should be scared
about what you presented here. And before we get to the questions, there's an organization that a lot of us talk bad about called Big Pharma.
Yes.
Big Pharma is actually has some good sides. It's made up of all the companies that are large that produce pharmaceuticals.
They
when
do.
when I was NMA president, I got invited to 2 of their board meetings. And these guys were flying in there on their 727s and G6s. And basically talk a bunch of BS. But if we could talk to them about how to upgrade their clinical trials in the academic and way they can make more profits, it might benefit us. So we can talk about that offline. Really like to do that. And these are really powerful positions. The guy who got me there was a guy named Larry Lucas. And he's retired now, but we should get him on the line. He's still playing golf someplace right now.
Yeah.
But
I think it's important to have Black scientists. That's one of the problems. You got a group, it'll be like all of us being in a room making decisions about a trial. Of course, we're going to prioritize our people. If you don't have a dissenting voice in the room that's white or Hispanic, we'd end up doing the same thing. We'd be biased toward our group. So we need to have representation in the room when the trial is being developed. The inclusion and exclusion criteria for many trials are too restrictive, which impacts Black patient participation. If you're trying to look at real world scenarios of how a drug works, of course, people are going to have diabetes, high blood pressure, renal disease, elevated creatinine. They shouldn't be excluded. You need to know if the drug is going to work in a real world scenario. And if you don't have voices in the room with a bunch of lab guys, you end up with these very restrictive inclusion and exclusion criteria, which is just one example that promotes disparities.
Very good, very good. Dr. Neighbor Stevens.
Well, I'm kind of down now because I don't really believe altruism drives anything.
No.
And we are losing what little ground we had made by increasing the numbers of Black physicians in this country. And if we don't get that pipeline increased so that we can get more Black scientists involved in what's going on in the scientific world, that is one of the things that I don't see a lot of effort being put into to try to rectify. Not only that do I not see energy being put in trying to rectify, I don't hear people even discussing it as a problem. And a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, we had a speaker on talking about AI. Now, AI, and I know they don't want me to compare it to a computer, but like any tool, is dependent on the information that it is fed. And it was recognized when AI was first being talked about, which was not just now, it's been around a minute.
Mm-hmm.
There was much concern voiced then, and I'm not hearing the concern now, that the information being fed into AI is incorrect.
It's racist.
It's biased.
Too, but it is incorrect. That's the
Mhm.
point that I'm trying to make, because the correct information doesn't exist, because we don't have the information being created through the trials and other things that need to be done. So I'm one of these people who doesn't like to just talk about a problem. I like to hear what we can try to do about a problem. And I commend you for forming two companies that are trying to tackle the issue of Black and brown participation in clinical research. And we need to applaud you again for that. And we need to, support you in whatever way we can. But we also need to have a holistic understanding of the nature of the beast and come up with strategies that can whack away at the different facets and layers of the problem. Because I agree with you. You need to be, I'm not anti-medicine. Do not take what I'm about to say as being anti-medicine, but we need to understand what it is we're taking and find out what it can potentially do to us.
So I do have some good news. We realize, huh?
I said we need
Make
to
it quick.
quick.
Okay, I'll make it real quick. So to increase the numbers of physicians that are trained at clinical trials, we're in a partnership now with the NCI, NIH, the AUA, and the NMA. And myself and 3 other urologists, we have experience, but we're going through the process now. We'll be certified. We're going to become mentors and start recruiting Black physicians who are in practice, getting them certified in good clinical practice. Okay. And we also have another grant that will provide the research support that's needed in the office, because most people don't have the staffing or the resources to do a clinical trial. So that's happening right now.
That's great. Dr. Wilkes.
Okay, I'm gonna first of all, Dr. Stone, good to have you back. Appreciate what you're doing. It's very important. So thank you for the presentation and thank you for the work that you're doing. I think one additional approach to this problem, I remember talking with Dr. Maxey a few years ago about the issue with blood pressure medicines and how, you know, they work differently on some people than other people. And I think we need to think and look at the regulations for clinical trials, because ultimately you take that data to the FDA and get an approval to sell whatever it is you're trying to sell, right? So if you can go to the FDA with a clinical trial that includes 96% of one group, when we know that the medicine may affect a different group differently, now you have motivation to broaden the people in your clinical trial. As long as the government regulations don't require you to do that, I'm with Dr. Neighbor-Stevens on the I don't believe altruism exists train, and we're heading fast in the wrong direction. So I think we talk sometimes on Black Health Trust about the importance of voting and elections and getting involved in policy, in addition to the other things like the work that you're doing with these different, with your businesses and your organizations that with whom you've partnered. So I just wanted you to respond to that briefly, if you could.
So unfortunately, rules have been put in place. You had the 1993, there was a revision to the rules to include more Black patients. There have been 2 or 3 revisions in the past 10 to 15 years, but the FDA is not enforcing.
Mhm.
You know, they have a requirement in place for diversity and inclusion in the trial and yada, 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 yada. But if you're not enforcing the law, and it's all based on money, takes $500 million to create a new drug.
Right.
We got to do it ourselves.
Well, not to be argumentative, which happens to be my nature.
Yeah.
I think we do have to do it ourselves. And I think we have to talk to the folks who we elect who could ensure that things are enforced. If the policy is there and people are not enforcing the policy, then it's on us to hold folks accountable. The one thing government can never contract away is ultimate accountability. It's public money, you're spending it. Someone has to come in and say, wait a minute, this is not in line with what we want. So I just would encourage us not to feel defeated at that point, and to say that while we're doing these other things, we need to also look at our elected folks who are in the all of the attorneys general that like to sue people for foolishness. We need to make sure that they're speaking about this and they're making some changes there.
Are you saying we need to vote?
Every
Ask me a
chance they
question.
give us, Dr. Maxey. And
Huh?
and the other thing I will say quickly is that, because Dr. Lisa has her hand up, is
Yep.
this.
And Ms. Hall has a critical question too.
People like Larry Lucas, who I know very well and I love dearly, is these are the folks who sometimes we don't know are sitting in places where they can take us and where they can make our questions and our statements relevant to the folks who are in those rooms. So I don't know who has replaced Larry Lucas now that he's retired and playing golf, but
We
man,
can
that
call
brother
him
did
and
a whole
find out.
lot.
But let's get some audience questions and statements in.
Ms. Hall wants to know, how do you find out about participating in a clinical trial, which is a critical question.
So here's the problem. You know, your average doctor may not be, your personal physician may not know or may not be participating. So it may require you to go to a drug company, and you end up going to a university place or working with somebody that is not necessarily your physician, which is one of the problems with us being recruited. And that's how you find out, but it's not always the best way, because it's sometimes a very impersonal type of scenario. Most people want to see their doctor advising them on what to participate in.
What is the best way though that you're going to create?
Oh, so hopefully through my company, we're going to have a a list of people who would like to participate based on maybe diseases that run in their families. And as trials come, we'll shorten the recruitment cycle and get right down to inclusion and exclusion. So that's kind of my plan, direct to patient recruitment and a decentralized clinical research organization type model.
Maybe we can talk with you one day in the next couple of weeks to see how we can work with you in that. This is a very worthwhile program you have, Dr. Stone. I'm so glad you're with us. Who else want to be recognized, Dr. Neighbor-Stevens?
Dr. Lisa is with us today.
In Jamaica, they have prostate cancer in Jamaica?
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
we do.
Oh, yes, they do.
Yes, we do. It's very, very high. Couple of things that I wanted I wanted to comment on, and that some of my friends abroad do more research than I do here, even though I'm trying to expand. The committee that advises the government on getting more minorities into it. It's going to be difficult to sue because the committee is set up in that you have to show that you have tried to get them, not that your percentage is where it should be or that you have adequate. You just have to have a plan to show that you tried. So you may want to try to fix it. Also, from what I understand, there is only one Black man on the committee, no Black women, and the rest of them are all white males, I think, on the advisory committee.
Jamaica or the U.S.?
U.S.
That
U.S.
is true.
That is true. I know, because I have some of because they want me to come back to be involved with that. And some of the men on the committee say, but we have back friends like you that we can talk to, so it's okay. And I don't think that's okay.
It's not okay.
I think you guys, I mean, I'm now in Jamaica. They're talking about coming back, but we'll see. But I think you guys have to be more actively involved with that. There are some of the research groups that would like to reach out to more minorities. I think some of them have now actively changed in that they're trying to recruit and will train minorities. But what I find in all the higher echelons, we are not involved. We're just not involved. And they said it's because we're not volunteering. So how do we fix that?
So I have an example. I just applied for a NIH grant in the new technology sector to improve health disparities. We looked at the reviewers. There were no Black reviewers. They were all white. There was an Indian, a couple of Asians. And based on the critique we got,
yes.
and the critique we got was completely out of touch with the reality of what's going on with Black patients. So there are individuals like myself, I'm sure all over, that apply for grants, trying to initiate their own research, but the racism in the system keeps us out of it as well. So I don't have the solution other than private sector money to fund projects that we're trying to promote. The system is rigged against us, unfortunately.
Dr. Stone, it's important that we do have a meeting. One of my former residents at Harlem Hospital is about the fourth ranking person in the FDA, and she is in charge of medical devices. So we need to talk with her. I won't give her a name, but we need to talk with her. She lives in Silver Springs. And she can open the doors for us, I do believe. Can we have some non-physician comments or input? I know a lot of individuals I've talked to about issues like this. I'd love you to speak up.
Well, we don't have one yet, but it is related, though, to the group. And that is, in men without a diagnosis of prostate cancer currently, does the use of testosterone increase the risk of developing prostate cancer? And
absolutely.
In Black men.
Absolutely not.
No.
It's safe.
Are there any people in Florida who want to speak?
Oh, can I just ask one more thing? We, as Dr. Stone knows, we have a big population in Jamaica, and prostate cancer is quite high. Is there
Yeah.
any way that we could actually refer some patients up to be part of the studies, or any way that we can include them?
That's part of our eventual goal. And I've actually done quite a few surgery missions to Jamaica. So I know Bill Aiken and Trevor Tulloch and some of the residents
Yes,
there.
I know them quite well, yes. Well, we
Yep.
can try, because I have a series of patients that actually could afford it to come up and do some stuff to and be parts of studies who would be willing, because they're mostly retired with money, with some money.
Yeah. I think the registry trial would be easy since it's not you're not having to take medication. We're just trying to create a pool of patients who are prostate cancer survivors, and then the opportunity will come for some of these newer medications, tissue studies, some other things to help us increase the numbers. That's what we need. We need more numbers.
Carl, can you ask a question?
Okay. Well, thank you. I'll get in touch too, because we're trying to increase some studies here.
Okay, I'd be
And it's
happy to
under
help.
my mandate from my institution that I really must do more.
Can you recognize Mr. Brooks for a question? Can you open Carl Brooks?
And there's
Simon?
someone else who has their hand up.
Mhm.
Who's that?
Whoever represented by Friends of Watts Towers Arts Center.
Okay, try Carl Brooks and then that person.
Randy, it looks like somebody's asking you guys how uh, can you collaborate with universities or pharmaceutical and philanthropic entities to expedite entry into clinical trials?
Is that for
That's,
you? That's your question to you, right?
oh, I don't know,
A
but
question to Black Health Trust.
yeah, it looks like it's to you guys.
Okay. We're gonna have a meeting and try to find out the best ways to do that and put you in touch with people who are doing that kind of research. One of the guys that I know is doing the most across the country, the guy named Keith Norris, who's at UCLA, but he does probably the major amount at NIH. And maybe we can get him on to talk about some of this along with Dr. Stone
Right.
again, and some of the others.
But again, the problem is that they're doing research on drugs they've already created, which is a problem.
Right.
You know, it has bias built in. They haven't done the early studies that include us, you know,
Yeah.
so
So there's another company called Vertex where the head of research there happens to be an African physician, African American physician. So there are several guys that are in these companies that are starting to become big. There's also another one who just got approved for like $5 billion for creating a drug to treat sickle cell. So we need to get back and have a program just on this. But I just spoke to Mr. Brooks. You had a question?
So we have the Friends of Watts Towers Art Center is unmuted.
Okay, let's talk to him.
Thank you, Rudy Barbia. I use the Friends because that's the computer I have on today. I had a question as a layman about the Gleason study scale. My dad was is the largest, was the longest survivor of a Gleason 8 score with the Keck group. And my great uncle just refused to do anything, and so he ended up passing on. My dad ended up with a nerve sparing process by which you slice the prostate, and when you have two clean pathologies, then you close them up. So he's doing well. I mean, he's got aphasia and other things, but the prostate issue is gone. So my question is, one, is the Gleason study still being used in the diagnoses or assessment process for Black male, well, for prostate analysis? And then two, what should those of us that are, 60 plus and have a history on the paternal side of the family, what should we be doing on an annual or biannual basis?
Okay, so to answer your first question, the Gleason scoring classification is an essential part of staging, and most research studies are kind of based on Gleason score. It goes from 2 to 10. The national average score is 6. 6 to 7 is not bad. 8 is moderately bad, and 9 and 10s are terrible. Um, as far as I have 5 family members with prostate cancer. My recommendation with people that have a family history are to start checking your PSA early. If you got young men in the family, I'd say get a baseline. I started in my late 30s just to get a baseline PSA. And then by the time you're 40, you should be seeing a urologist every year. If you have the opportunity to do a good genetic test, do it. But right now, the testing is not, it's not 100% accurate. But if you got the BRCA gene in your family and you've had somebody with breast cancer, you're going to be at a much higher risk. And so you really need to stay on top of getting your PSA checked, getting your prostate checked. That's
Just
about
as
all.
just as a follow-up, I'm in the soup for that, both maternally and paternally.
Mhm.
Secondly, I've tracked my numbers because Kaiser allows you to take your numbers and put them on a graph. And then
Mhm.
the number went down, then it went up again, and then it leveled. And the urologist says, well, I know you're at a higher number, but don't worry about it. If it doesn't double in 10 years, you don't have to worry about it. I said, but the trajectory is going the wrong way.
What's
So
the
I didn't
numbers?
say that. Pardon me?
You know the numbers offhand?
Uh, I
Well,
don't.
just remember an increase of greater than 0.75 in 12 months is not good. Okay, that's something
Yep.
you need to investigate.
And I
Even
can,
if it just went from 1 to 1.9 in 12 months, that's abnormal.
okay.
And, and so
Is
you
the
get an MRI.
5-year scale not in your, I should be able
No,
to, okay, okay, fine.
in
Okay,
urology, it should be based on 12 months. So
got
if
it.
if it's
I'll
not
do the math.
increasing at that rate, you're all right.
All right,
Because
I'll
the
do the
prostate
arithmetic.
is growing. So it's going to go up a little bit every year.
Okay,
So,
I'll do the arithmetic and check back with him. Thank you.
okay, no problem.
Any other questions in the chat? Well, we're
Nope.
at, we're at the top of the hour. Did you see some other questions, Dr. Neighbor Stevens, Dr.
No.
No.
Okay. Well, we'd like to have last comments from you, Dr. Stone, and we appreciate this beautiful but scary lecture.
I think I think my message is that the unintended consequences of having a president like Donald Trump has affected all sectors of American society as it relates to us. So it's incumbent upon us to be involved in local politics, pay attention to healthcare related issues in your region. Um, if there's any opportunity to support education of our people about clinical research, and I don't mean just for prostate cancer, but there are about 10 diseases that significantly impact our communities, and the disparities continue to remain the same. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we have an opportunity to impact things ourselves. So um, that's how I'm going to end it. It looks bleak, but where there's chaos, there's opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stone. This was absolutely beautiful. Dr. Walks.
Thank you again, Dr. Stone.
My
Just want
pleasure.
to wave my hand at Mr. Barbie, who I have a little bit of history with. Good to see you. My final comment is this. Dr. Stone, when I get scared, I tend to either do something or run. So I did something. I typed in how to find clinical trials, and it took me to something called trialsearch.com, and I pulled up in my spare time. I can make a little money doing clinical trials because some of them people do get reimbursed. So I just want to let people know that when you're interested in something, find out about it, especially if it scares you. I really think that the work that Dr. Stone is doing is tremendous. I tell everyone I can about a good friend of mine who I knew from the time he was a little kid, who became a Harlem Globetrotter, was a wonderful, amazing athlete, and died from prostate cancer at 42. Died at 42. Didn't get diagnosed. Died at 42. And I think it's important for us to understand that things impact us differently. And when things impact us differently, we have to behave as if we understand things impact us differently. So this kind of information is very important. And I don't know, Dr. Stone, other than to keep on doing what you're doing, how we can motivate our families to yell at the men from the time they get to be very young about just healthcare, taking care of ourselves. So we've got to educate folks and motivate folks to do better. That's what I got.
Oh, one last thing. Black families, we tend to keep secrets. So I encourage the men who've been diagnosed with prostate cancer to share the information with the young men in the family. Don't wait until somebody's diagnosed to say, oh, yeah, I had that.
Right.
Dr. Neighbor-Stevens.
Well, I am going to again thank Dr. Stone and applaud Dr. Stone for laboring in the vineyard as hard as he is laboring, and take a lesson from him and share not just the issue, the information about the issue of prostate cancer, but the whole issue of clinical research and the need for us to know more about us. As I interact with my young students in the work that I do, and I hope that the importance of what he's doing and the need for more of what he's doing resonates with our audience, and they too will share the word in their networks.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Stevens, Neighbor-Stevens. Dr. Stone, a couple of questions before we end. One, I think we're going to try to finance a security detail for you in that wonderful state that you're in. Make sure that you're okay. You're very valuable. Another thing I'd like you to speculate, and I told you I was going to ask this about how one of the top 4-star generals in the country, head of our Defense Department, with availability to the best treatment supposedly on earth, ended up with prostate cancer. That's one. And also, I don't know if you comment on the state that Dr. Neighbor is in sometimes, how the attorney or surgeon general of that state has allowed issues to happen such as a outbreak of measles, and telling the people that it's their choice whether they want to send them to school or not. I know that's not your area, but I'm asking you to comment.
Okay. So for the first question, having served 19 years in the Air Force, when you are elevated to that level, and there's a lot of things with appearances of strength, power, and they're trying to project that overseas. I think General Austin, being a proud Black man, was not comfortable with speaking about his health issues. And I would even guess maybe he's that same way within his family, because he's trying to promote a certain level of strength. And that kind of put him in a bad situation, because having that amount of responsibility, control over the nuclear codes, he had a responsibility to let somebody know. And I think that's kind of typical. I see it in my patients. Men are proud. We don't want to be seen as weak. And having a diagnosis like prostate cancer, it could, to that person, he may have felt that it would be perceived as a sign of weakness. The same with Dexter within my circle of friends. Dexter King, he kind of became reclusive and didn't communicate about what was going on when he had physician friends around him. And I see this all the time. So I think that's kind of what happened. And when you have prostate cancer and you go through treatments, there are potential hiccups that can happen, like getting a urinary tract infection. And if you don't respond quickly, that could turn into a semi-septic picture where bacteria get in your bloodstream. So if he had to go to the hospital, it was more than your average urinary tract infection. So while what happened to him was unfortunate, it's not unusual. I see that behavior, and I think that's what happened. Now, what state are you in, Doc?
Me?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think he was referring to your state.
Florida.
So the politics of the South has kind of gone off the rails, and it's not just Florida. It's Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, where the public good has become secondary to political theater. And I think that's exactly what's going on. Like what has happened in Alabama, where I am, with the judge declaring the embryos as people. That was corrected, but they are about to target diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the state of Alabama, for which our mayor here in Birmingham, Randall Woodfin, a good young brother, has said if that passes, he's going to push for all athletes to stay out of the state of Alabama.
What was his
And it's
first?
huh?
What was his first name?
Randall Woodfin. He's a Morehouse graduate. He's a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, my fraternity. He's about 39. He's a young, bright. He's done a lot for the city. I mean, we got a couple $1 billion of investment happening in Birmingham. Everything is happening right now, but the state around us is going in a different direction.
I like his first name and I like his fraternity. Well,
Yeah.
thanks everybody for being with us. I know we're way past time, but this has been so informative. Thanks again, and we'd love to have you back. We have to have you back to
Oh,
solve.
I'm always available for you guys. I love you
Right.
guys.
Thank you,
So,
Dr. Stone. Love you too, brother.
Simon, thank you so much, my friend. Everybody have a great evening. Have a great day.
All right. Thank
Hey,
you.
everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Mm.